All right, hi, I'm Brandon, and this is my good buddy Bryn. This is a little project that I'm putting together. I'm gonna call it Bowie's Final Strike, a journey back to the Yu Yu Hakusho TCG. Um, the purpose of this, series is just me and Bryn and another person in our play group have been getting back into playing the TCG, kind of exploring around, looking at different formats, cards, all that kind of stuff. And one of the things that we really found, it seemed like there was just no content out there in regards to the game, gameplay, deck building, anything, and I didn't expect there to be. Um, and I kind of just thought it would be cool to try to make my own little series, kind of documenting our journey back to the game um, that we played as a kids, and trying to figure out, you know, how the game works, uh, what cards were available, all those things that we didn't know, and trying to put it together that maybe somebody else will find interest in this. Um, so I think one of the things that I wanted to talk about first, Bryn, was kind of like our experience with the card game, you know, growing up when we played with it. Like, what do you remember about that time?
Well, I remember we mostly played Yu-Gi-Oh at the time. Yu-Gi-Oh! Hakusho was kind of a side game that we picked up because pretty much every time a new TCG came out or we saw something in the store, we'd pick it up and try it out. I think this one just had the benefit that some of us knew the anime and liked it, so it caught our eye. But I remember it being something that you and the other friend in our group, you two definitely were into it a little more than I was. I think at one point it was both of your top game, and I was still pushing the Yu-Gi-Oh idea. But I definitely remember playing it often and going to a couple of tournaments from time to time.
Yeah, for sure. I think one of the funny things about that is I can remember like picking it up for the first time and didn't even really, I think, watch a lot of the show other than what was on Cartoon Network at the time. So just like seeing episodes. But I remember playing Yu Gi Oh! At our little card shop up here. And one of the people there had Yu Yu Hakusho cards. And I just remember seeing the foils for the Dark Tournament pack with like the black background and being like, oh man, these cards look cool. And watching him play a game with somebody, and then he kind of talked us into picking up some packs. Didn't know what they did, what the cards were, anything like that. Um, and then I think from there it kind of just like started shifting, and we like just liked the card art, liked the different ideas of it, and started playing a little bit up there with some of the guys who all played Yu-Gi-Oh too. So we were all there together. Um, but that's kind of like my remembrance of starting that card game is like just buying a couple packs of Dark Tournament. I think by the time like we actually picked it up, like Spirit Detective was already like out. It wasn't like we jumped in at the beginning. I think we probably jumped in like in Dark Tournament. Um, it was fun. Um, I know for a while, like you said, like it really rivaled Yu-Gi-Oh, which we were really into at the time. Um, so it was cool to have something else to play. It wasn't cool to have to split my money as a child between two games. I know that because we didn't have enough to make a good deck for either one. Um,
Nope.
and that was kind of one of the things that I thought was uh, interesting. Like we did play up until Alliance, right? Like I remember that first time, like it was so big. Like we were like, okay, we got to get a box of this when it comes out, and we had boxes, and we'd buy a box of Gateway and a box of Betrayal, a box of Exile, a box of Alliance, whatever it was, and I can't remember it ever ending for us. Like it's a really weird like period. Like I know the game came to an end, but I don't think we actually had knowledge of that. Like as we were playing as kids, like it was like I think it was like we kind of thought like, hey, here's Alliance, and then there's gonna be another pack after this, right? And like just not having any information, like not really looking up a lot of that stuff on the internet at that point, like any of that kind of thing. So I think it just kind of faded away from us, and we realized there was never going to be another pack, um, which is sad because it was a lot of fun for us for a long time. And speaking of that, I guess I was one of the lucky people, or not so lucky or dumb or whatever happened, but I know like jumping back into this, like couldn't find any cards that I owned from before. I'm sure they are in a landfill somewhere, just screaming. Um, and it sucked. I know you were able to find some stuff. Once I kind of talked to you about it, you were able to find some stuff though, which was pretty cool. And it wasn't just little things either. You want to tell me a little bit about some of the things you found in your collection when you went back through it?
This is one of the times where I guess being a hoarder of all those old card games paid off because I mean digging through things I still have cards for other card games we used to pick up and play along the way that maybe we bought a starter deck or two. But I ended up finding my whole collection. It was a binder filled with things from Ghost Files up through Alliance. Um, Looking back at it now, it's not the most impressive thing that I had, but I had a king, one of each of the four kings. So I guess Ryzen is pretty impressive. The other one's a bit more common to come across. But I found some other things that I didn't realize were as rare as they were, like Yusuke Ryzen Successor, that I couldn't tell you how I got.
Yeah.
But it really was able to jumpstart me getting back into the game. And I also realized how much I didn't have, too, though. I think maybe I had 3 halts total, which, sure, we'll talk about this, but back in the day, if we had 2 decks, we didn't share cards between them. So maybe one deck got 2 and one deck got 1. So I was lucky to have 3 at all. And maybe a single burst of power or 2.
Yeah, I always use that as the joke, right? Like talking about like building decks and who knows. I think we had card sleeves by that time. I don't think we were like complete trash, but
Yeah.
I
So
never really like now. I use all the same deck sleeves. Like they're just all one color, same brand, and if I got to switch something around, I can switch it around. But like back then, I don't know. That wasn't a thing. Like either one deck had like burst of power, and the other one had a Kitty Love, and that was your burst of power. So there was no real like idea of what worked for us back then because you know if you had your good deck and your good deck had backyard dummies and your bad one had combat knives, something like that. That's just the way it was, uh, which seems silly now, but I mean there was ways we could have worked around that for sure, but it just never happened.
it
Um,
was just about the game, though. So
yeah,
we didn't want to take that time to swap cards between decks. We had our best deck and our favorite team, and everything else was just kind of secondary after that. So you didn't want to go and swap and improve it. It's just like, no, they're in my best deck. That's the deck that I put the time and effort into.
yeah, that was the thing. Like that was back in the days for us of like deck boxes were sandwich bags stuffed in an open Yu-Gi-Oh tin, like 5 sandwich bags in an old Yu-Gi-Oh tin that like somebody stepped on, so it's like busted. But um, it's funny to think about that now. But so just kind of moving on, I guess, but in the same vein, like I was just thinking, like, how did we get back into the Yu Yu Hakusho TCG and like wanting to pick it up again? And I think, like I was talking to you earlier, I went back on eBay today, and I was like looking at my past purchases, and I just on a whim happened to be thinking about Yu Yu Hakusho for some reason, and I was like, yeah, remember those cards? That was pretty fun. And I was like, I wonder if I could find some on eBay. And then I went on and I found a card, and I was like, I found a Yu Kaito, the Taboo Master, um, and it was like, I used to love this card. I'm just gonna buy it. And that was from the first of many purchases from Elkenrod out there, who's helped me out along the way as far as my collection and getting cards to play. So uh, thank you for that. Um, but that was all the way back in January of 2023, which seems crazy to me. It doesn't seem like I had even been collecting again that long and trying to build decks and do this whole thing. So like it's almost like a year and a half. It doesn't seem possible from where we just were. But I remember getting that in the mail, and I was just kind of like looking at it, reading it, and I was like, you know what? I wonder what it would be like to play now that we're adults, kind of have a better understanding of like TCGs, how they play, reading something and just being like, hey, this is a good card, or no, this isn't a good card. And like, I don't think I felt like when I started thinking about it, I'm like, oh, as a kid, like, we didn't really get the full experience to kind of know like what was good in this game and what wasn't. And I was like, maybe we can play this again. And I remember I had that idea and I started just kind of buying some cards that I remembered. Like I would just think of it and be like, oh, this was a good card I think back then. Let me buy that. And I started calling you, talking to you about it, and being like, hey, what do you think about trying to play this game again? And you were kind of reluctant at first. I know you were like, well, yeah, maybe. And then I started like talking to you about some of the ideas I had, and I was like, well, I don't think we ever played this card, Brennan. It seems like it's really good. Like, I think like we could just this could be like rediscovering a whole new card game again. And I kind of like buttered you into it, I think. But I think you're pretty glad I did at this point. Like, what do you remember of that? Like,
Yeah, you really reached out at a bad time because I had given up most card games by that point. Not because I didn't like them, but they're a money pit, and that even wasn't the biggest reason either. It's just you also need a group to play with.
yeah,
So I've gone in and out of Yu-Gi-Oh, having people to play with, not having people to play with. Same with Magic. Yu Hakusho is an example, and I was finally at a point where I was kind of content. I think I had to talk myself into it over a long period to just say, hey, you know what, I'm not really going to be able to play TCGs right now. I just don't have the group to do it. I don't want to spend the money on cards to just look at them.
mm-hmm.
And you brought that up about wanting to get back into it. And to be perfectly honest, I think if I hadn't found my collection and had that to jumpstart me, probably would have been a no. Not because I don't like the idea and didn't have fond memories of it, but I just didn't want to spend a lot of money into it. So at least I could talk myself into it saying, oh, well, I don't have to spend the money.
Mm-hmm.
I already have. You touched on this. There were a lot of cards I realized we didn't have.
Mm-hmm.
But till that point, I was like, oh, yeah, I have the cards I could dig out. I still had the two decks that I used to use back when we played as kids. And looking at them, even without knowing the cards we didn't know about at the time, but just looking through them and after playing years of now Magic and other card games, I realized just how poorly built they were.
Yeah.
And what you said, like, kind of hit me with, rediscovering this card game and it feeling fresh and new and not like the way we used to play it. I started to understand that when I looked at the decks and I'm like, I just don't know why I put these cards in. This was my deck and it still looks awful. So yeah, when you reached out, there was some reluctance there, but enough things were able to tip me in the direction of trying it out. And I'm glad we have. It's crazy to think that it's been over a year. I know for you it was a little longer before you reached out and I started getting into it, but still, it's been over a year for me now.
Yeah,
and so glad that we into it.
I am. I've also been very frustrated along the way as we found out like certain cards. I'm like, man, this card exists and is just like brutal. We'll get into that in some later episodes too. But one of the things you touched on that I definitely want to talk about in an episode too. Two things actually. Number one is like finding cards, the price of cards, and trying to purchase cards enough to complete a deck, and what that looked like for me. and you, and the craziness that it feels like it is that you have to like try to, you know, loading up newly listeds on eBay every day, hoping you find something at the right time that's not a laughable price, is something. So it wasn't an easy journey to get where we even are. And there's still stuff that I'm looking for. And I think everyone is, like I just never even thought, uh, well, before I talk about that, I guess a little bit more, I guess I would explain it is I think one of the big things for me and you getting back into this is realizing that there was just cards we never even knew existed, right? Like when we played in our little, you know, local card shop here, you know, I can remember playing there for Yu Yu Hakusho and there being like six of us. Like it wasn't like a like big pool of people. Um, and so like we didn't really know like, oh, there's tournament packs. And I mean we did because at some point I know I bought that Makuru King and that had the tournament
Yep.
go. So we did know they existed, but we didn't know how to get them other than probably buying them off eBay. And I remember, funny quick side story. I remember buying that king, and like it was going off on eBay before school started, you know, and it was like I like woke up to go to school in the morning, and it was gonna go off like an hour after school was, and like I was like checking my bid to see if it was like still winning, and of course by the time like it was time to go to school I was like losing, and my mom was being a nice mom and was like letting me use like her money to like because she had the card. I didn't have a card back then, so I was like, oh yeah, she's like, you can bid up to this amount, and I remember like that amount was already gone, and I was like, you know what, mom, I'm just gonna just click this a little bit higher and go to school, and you won't ever know this happened. And I ended up winning it. I can't remember what I paid for it, and sorry to my mom for that one, but she got over it. Um, but like besides that, I think like huge things that we just didn't know existed were like energy release.
Yeah.
I got something for you. Um, the big,
Meditation.
I was gonna say the crown jewel that all of us are always want, meditation, um, and just like never knowing those cards existed. Even Demon Energy Scanner. We didn't know about that. It was like if it didn't come out in the regular pack and it wasn't one of the king pieces, like I don't think we even knew about any of it. None of the league set stuff, like none of that. Like we did know the one league set with for Dark Tournament because I remember they had it at our little play group at the for the local card shop, and it was like I remember like you were supposed to go what like every week, and they'd give you one of the cards, and I think we
Yep.
all just went up there and like gave the guy like $25, and he gave us, oh, here you go, here's the whole thing. Like we just told him like, oh, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to make it every week. You think I could just buy these? And like he didn't care. He was just like, yeah, give me your money and take the cards. So we all had the puppets, but like other than that, no, none of us knew about like energy release, meditation. I got something for yous, all that kind of stuff. That just seems like wild now.
I mean, Boss.
What was that?
Orb of Boss or
Yeah,
Bast. Yeah,
orb,
that one. That.
crazy, and like how good is that card, and just playing it so far. And I think like one of the funny things about orb is like I remember when we finally found out about it like the second time around. I'm like, oh man, that's such a like control card. Like there's definitely like this is super playable. We gotta have this. And like then just from that conversation, going to look up an Orb of Bass and just basically thinking like this card doesn't exist. Doesn't exist. I'm never gonna be able to find it. I'm never gonna be able to get one. And for a lot of these cards we talked about, that's how it's still felt. Um, I think we're lucky to have what we have, and have really tracked down some and got some great deals on stuff and some bad deals too. But what are you gonna do? But you know, I just picked up a bunch of those last pieces. I think about, I got the three I got somethings. The third meditation for me, which I cherish now, and a couple more energy releases, things like that. Now I paid my fair share for them for sure, but I didn't think I was going to see him again. And shout out to Invisio for selling those to me, because that made my year. Hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully, hopefully something better happens to me this year than just cards. But for now, I'll say that. Um, but yeah, so that was one of the things that I think really changed our outlook on things, and being like, oh man, there's these like really like staple cards that we just had no idea existed, and changes how we play the game. Like I think the game is completely different than how we played it before. Again, we were, I don't even know how old we were. What was it, 2003? So what, like 14,
Yeah.
something like that. But it's different now, obviously, and we just have more experience with TCGs and like looking at a card and just kind of baseline valuing, like, does this look like a good card or a bad card? But one of the things, that we'll talk about, in an episode too, is just how badly worded cards are, how just like everything's gotten errata, and not knowing it. I can just think of like in the beginning, not in the beginning, but like thinking like, oh man, all these mini games only cost one spirit energy, and like they kind of just stop and attack. Like, why wouldn't you run these? And then like we played that for a while, and then we're like, oh wait, they all cost six now.
That good.
So I think a lot of that stuff, like, and not only that, like, this is nothing I'm saying that's not going to be known to anybody, but like power creep, and like thinking like I remember just getting it and be like, oh, we'll just play with all the sets. We'll play all the way up to Alliance, right? Let's just get the cards you want to play, build the team you want to build, and we'll just play with cards up until Alliance. And we quickly learned that that was not as fun. And I think you could attest to that too.
Yeah, that was one of the fastest decisions we made,
Yeah.
and then we'll go into, I'm sure, many discussions later with, but we're still trying to
Balance.
rebalance broken card game.
Mm-hmm. And it's never gonna be perfect. I think that's the thing. We know that it can't be perfect. I think the big thing for us was really just trying to be like, hey, how can we make the most teams playable? Not necessarily great, not necessarily all on the same level, because I think that's impossible. But how can we make the most teams, especially the teams that we all want to play, playable? And like at least have a chance, right? And it's still, you can't, we haven't fixed it, and I don't think we're ever gonna fix it. But I think we have kind of changed some things around. We've banned a couple cards that we thought, we argued on a couple of them for quite some time, which we'll get into on another episode too. But I just thought we've really kind of tried to make it our own, and realizing like like this this game can be whatever we want it to be now. Like it doesn't, it's dead, and we can make it however it works for our play group and is the most fun. And I'd like to kind of share some of those ideas that we've had, and kind of put it out there for other people. I'm not claiming, and either is Bryn, that like we're, the holy masters of this card game. This is just like us like going through it and learning it. But I think one of the things that I just really thought was that when me and you tried to find like, okay, well, how would I build a deck? What are some ideas? What characters would I run for this? Like, how good is this card? Is this a staple? Is this something I should run like three of? Like, it didn't exist. You couldn't find things, and there are videos out there, but like, weren't a lot. and it was very selective and not very descriptive. I mean, I'm just happy there that those people made any kind of content at all to have something. So shout out to them for that. But like going into any kind of like talk about it or analysis of it or anything, I just felt like there was nothing. And I've never done this. I don't know how to. I just figured out how to hopefully record this in a somewhat of an acceptable manner today. And I've never done this at all. But I was like, what's stopping me from like trying to put this together and uh, talk about this game? And if three people watch it, three people watch it. But one day I think there'll be somebody out there who's gonna look and go, man, this is exactly what I was looking for too. And that's kind of what I'm hoping maybe I can do. So I don't want to go too much further. There's, like I said, I think we're gonna try to upload something maybe like once a week, just talking about a different topic. Experience of buying cards, trying to find cards, talking about what formats we're playing and cards that we ban, cards that we've, you know, think are really good, ones that don't quite meet the mark but might have a use. And, like I think one of the things that I have in hope in posting this kind of stuff is just like getting feedback from other people who do know more than me, right? Like, so I'm hoping that there's people out there who will see this and be like, oh, you know what you should do for that? Don't run that, run this, and this is why you should run that. And um, that would be cool. So um, I'm gonna try to post something like I said about once a week, kind of just talking about our journey like back into this card game and what it's been like. Sometimes it'll be just me. Sometimes I'll have Bryn here. I'm gonna hope to get some other people and kind of interview some other people that I kind of met along the way, which is cool. Um, just have fun doing it, talking about this card game and play some games, go over some decks that we built and kind of share those with people and can do anything. It's just like the card game. It's like up to us now. So uh, thanks for watching if you've watched this until the entirety. And, I'm going to get this posted up and hopefully somebody enjoys it out